Ajahn, could you explain right view and right understanding again, please? What are the similarities and differences between right view and right understanding?
Is basically right view and right understanding is the same thing. Sometimes sammaditi, which is the Pali phrase behind right view, sometimes sammaditi is translated as right view, sometimes it is translated as right understanding. Yeah. So that means sometimes it's just random whether we call it one thing or the other. So, if you ask the difference between right view and wisdom, what is the difference between right view and wisdom? And the difference is that right view in the beginning, it is something that we take on board because of faith in the Buddha. Yeah, the Buddha says that the world is in a certain way. And so we say, because I'm a Buddhist and because I think the Buddha was an extremely wise person, I have faith in the way the Buddha talked about the world. So it starts off with an act of faith and confidence. And then as you practice on the Buddhist path, as you start to understand how the Dhamma actually works, that faith and confidence starts to transform into understanding things in a deeper way. Yeah? Then it becomes more like your right view. Instead of being the Buddha's right view that you take on board, it starts to become your way of looking at the world. Yeah? And that is what, so gradually right view goes from being about faith and confidence to becoming your personal understanding of the world and your understanding of things. Until eventually you become a stream enterer. And when you become a stream enterer, that's when you get the full right view, because you fully see the world in the way the Buddha saw it. And then it is your right view, yeah, your personal right view. And that is when everything becomes solid, because you see the world according to the way the world actually is. That's how you can think about right view and right understanding, yeah, as they develop along the path.
Thank you, Ajahn. Sukhihotu Ajahn, given that rebirth is of an abstract nature, are there any suttas about rebirth which we can see and realize it now? Such realization will be useful, especially for children and some hardcore adults, to encourage them to put more effort to walk this path.
Yeah, well, I think is there any way we can experience it now? I mean, it really depends. Yeah, it depends on, people are so different, and some people have had experiences of rebirth. There are little children who remember past lives and all of these kind of things. There are a lot of people who had these experiences in the world. And in fact, yesterday I was just reading an article. Yeah, after I finished this. Finished with you yesterday, I read a short article that that appeared, that kind of was someone else pointed out. And this article was written by a philosopher. This was a Swedish philosopher. And he was saying that the only logical thing is to believe in rebirth. That's what he was saying, yeah? Or actually, he didn't say rebirth, but he said about life after death. And of course, rebirth is a kind of life after death, right? And this was a philosopher. This was someone who has kind of been trained in the Western background. Atheists don't really have any belief in God or anything like that. But he said the logical conclusion, if you look at the evidence in the world, is actually to believe in life after death. In other words, to believe in rebirth. And he said the reason for that is because when you look at all of the near-death experience that people have had. Yeah, there's lots of near-death experience in the world, and when people come back from those near-death experiences, they tend to be absolutely sure that there is life after you die. And he said that it didn't matter what your prior belief was, whether you were a Christian beforehand, whether you were a Buddhist beforehand, whether you were an atheist beforehand who doesn't believe in anything, whether you were a complete skeptic, a free thinker, whatever you want to call it, all of that was irrelevant. Yeah, regardless of what kind of person you were, if you had a near-death experience, every one of them, in the same way, would then believe that there was life after death. And then he said that the deeper that experience was, if it was a very deep near-death experience, there was like a scale they have that the researchers use to decide how deep the near-death experience is. The deeper it was, the more likely you were to believe that this was the truth. And if the near-death experience was really, really deep, then every person, there was no exception, everyone believed that there was life after death, regardless of your background before. And so this is all part of his argument, yeah. And then the last part of the argument was that, well, not only do they believe that there is life after death, but they say that the life that you have in the near-death experience is even more real than the life we have now. When they come back, they say that human existence, the life we have here, it feels like a dream in comparison to what happens in the near-death experience. It is much more real than the experience that we have now. So that is kind of very, very fascinating. And he said that when you draw all of this evidence together, when you look at this, he said that actually not to believe in rebirth, not to believe in other, actually is irrational. The rational conclusion, very powerful rational conclusion, is to say that there is such a thing as life after death, that there is rebirth. And very often the reason why, as a society, we don't believe in these things is simply because it is part of our culture not to believe in it. Yeah, it is not because it is logical. It is just, again, this idea of views. Yeah, views come from feelings, and because the rest of the society doesn't believe in this, it feels good not to believe in it. And it takes a very strong person. It takes the black sheep, not the white sheep. It takes the black sheep who dares to stand out, to be willing to think differently. And so this philosopher may be one of these black sheep. So I think the evidence is already overwhelming. Yeah, it is just that our society takes time to catch up with the evidence. And then as the evidence emerges, I think that, I think it's only a matter of time before we take things like rebirth, things like life after death, much more seriously, because we understand there is a reality behind this.
Thank you, Ajahn. Ajahn, would holding on very strongly to a theistic idea or, say, pure land idea further obstruct one to, in future lives, not being able to meet the Dharma?
Yes, I mean, if you have ideas that are counter to the way the Buddha taught, it depends on how you deal with Pure Land. I mean, there's maybe different ways of doing that. And whether you really believe in it literally, or you believe in it maybe more like metaphorically, like a simile or whatever. It depends on how you believe in these things. But if you believe in any idea that is counter to the Buddhist teachings, if you believe that there is a creator God that created the world, if you believe in the idea of a soul, a permanent soul inside, if you believe in the Amitabha heaven as a kind of wonderful place you can hang out with the Buddhas and just become enlightened just like that without having to do the work, of course, there is a problem because it is counter to the way the Buddha teaches. We have to actually apply ourselves. You can't just chant Amitofo and then chant Amitofo, get reborn in the Pure Land, and then hang out with the Buddhas and become enlightened. It is too easy. Life isn't like that. It doesn't make any sense to believe in these very simplistic ideas. The Buddha says you have to practice the path. Without practicing the Noble Eightfold Path, you're not going to get the results. So you have to be very careful when it comes to these ideas. If they are a blockage because they are counter to the Buddhist path, then of course it's going to stop you. And it will stop you not only in this life, but as you say, also in future lives. Because because you carry the ideas of one life, if you make those views strong in this life, you will carry those ideas with you into your next life. So if you are a staunch Christian now, you are very likely that you will believe in God also in your next life. So we carry these ideas with us because they are dear to us. They are part of our psychology, and it is our psychology that we bring from one life to the next one.
Dear Ajahn, if we have difficulty in breathing during our deathbed, what kind of meditation should we focus on?
You don't really have to focus on meditation. You just, on your deathbed, you can just be at peace. You can just relax, just learning to let go, understanding that, when on your deathbed, you know that you have to let go. You have no choice in the matter. And this is why the death experience is so powerful, because you are literally forced to let go, whether you want to or not. So it's going to be a very powerful experience. Whether you do mindfulness of breathing or not is not so important. If you can do it, and it feels natural, you can. But a lot of the time when you die, you just want to relax. You just want to sit, lie there and allow the process to happen. If you have been living well, and you have been living with right view and looking at the world in the right way, you're going to be very peaceful on your deathbed. Because it will force you to let go, and you're going to naturally move towards a peaceful state of mind. So there isn't any right or wrong, but sometimes you don't really know until you get there which one is the appropriate thing to do.
Ajahn, you translated upadana as picking up, also translated as clinging, grasping, or personalizing.
Yeah.
One, besides anupadana, is there another Pali word, the opposite of upadana? Anupada, not picking up, is passive. How about another Pali word which is actively abandoning wrong views? Would it be pahana, or is there another Pali word?
Yeah, that's true. So pahana is like giving up. Yeah, so that is the opposite of clinging. That's quite right. So you can use those words if you want to. That's true. Pahana, I mean, there's many different words in Pali which mean giving up. You have patinisagga. Patinisagga means to relinquish or to let go. You have vosagga related to patinisagga, which also means to relinquish or let go. You have pahana, as you said. You have chaga means to let go. You have things like mutti. Mutti means it's like close to the idea of vimutti, is like freeing something. When you free something, you're also letting it go. So there's heaps of words in Pali which talk about this. You have nekama. Nekama is the second factor of the Noble Eightfold Path. Nekama actually means the literal meaning of nekama is to depart. Yeah, you are departing from lay life. The literal meaning is not actually renunciation. It's more like departing or leaving something behind. So that also is a kind of giving things up. Yeah. So all of these words actually point in the same direction. The word upadana, it is true that Bhikkhu Bodhi translates it as clinging. And I must admit, I usually agree with Venerable Bhikkhu Bodhi because he's such a wonderful translator, and his kind of skills in the English language are really unparalleled. He writes very beautiful. He writes very beautifully in general. But when it comes to clinging, I'm not sure if I fully agree with him. I hope I'm allowed to disagree with Bhikkhu Bodhi. It's a bit of dangerous to disagree with these great translators, but it's not really about clinging so much, because clinging means like you are already holding it, and then you're holding it even more. It's like a small child clinging on to their mummy. Yeah, if the small child is kind of a little bit anxious or afraid, they will hold on to their mummy or their daddy. Or something like that. It's not really about that. Upadana is what happens when you crave. We want to satisfy the craving, so we grasp things in the world. It is the whole act of grasping. It is also includes clinging. It includes attachment. It includes what you do before, but it's also the very act of picking something up and then grasping it. So I think grasping is a preferable translation to clinging. Or even just picking up, taking hold of something is kind of satisfactory. And then anupadana is the opposite of that, is the letting go, as you say, and all of these other words are pointing in that direction.
So, Kyoto Ajahn, what's the name of the meditation technique guided early this morning? Is it part of the skeleton corpse meditation you discouraged earlier? Is it advisable that we practice this kind of meditation on a daily basis? There was a sudden fear felt, and it ceased after contemplating on that feeling, and thereafter the mind became clear, bright, and tranquil. While this can be experienced when we are in meditation, I wonder if we can still remain calm and clear if we died in sudden accidents, coma, dementia, etc. How do we prepare our mind for such tragic death?
I would say the contemplation I did before, I would just call that the Maranasanya, the perception of death, or the Maranasati, the recollection of death, or the mindfulness of death. I wouldn't call it the cemetery contemplation. The cemetery contemplation are much more they are much more visual. Yeah, visual in the sense of they're much more. It's more kind of gory. Yeah, you see all the gore, you see all the negative things. The one I do is much more neutral. It doesn't have such powerful feelings involved with it. But once you know where that meditation is going, it is going towards a sense of release, a sense of happiness, and all these kind of things. It becomes much less scary. It is scary when you go through the process of letting go. But when you see that the process of letting go actually leads to a sense of peace and emptiness and all of these beautiful qualities, then I think the process itself also becomes less scary. Once you have done it once or twice, I think it becomes far easier to do it again once you understand the thing. And what is so beautiful about it is that it prepares you for death. It prepares you for when the death moment comes. Actually, why be afraid of this? You've been living a good life, you've been doing all of the right things. Actually, it is actually not such a big problem. So try to do it again. And I think as you do it again, you will start to overcome that kind of fear that may arise. Yeah, it is natural that there is some fear in the face of death, but by getting habituated to the idea, actually the fear also disappears. When it comes to the kind of dying, when you die because of dementia or Alzheimer or whatever, and you don't know what's going on, then that's usually okay, because if you prepare yourself now, then when you die of Alzheimer, just before you die, the mind will become clear again. The mind will come back to its ordinary senses. You will be able to remember the instructions, yeah? And then you will be okay, and you will actually have a good death as a consequence. The problem is that the problem is that as long as we are locked into the brain, because the brain is sick, that means our mind is not able to function properly. But the moment you start releasing from that brain, the mind becomes clear again, and you start to be able to function normally. So it's not really tragic. Yeah, it's just a temporary illness that you have during life. But when you die, there isn't really any tragedy there. Then you come back to your senses. This is actually well known in medical science. There's a term for that. It's called terminal lucidity. Terminal lucidity means the clarity of mind you get as you go through the dying process.
Ajahn, what about Bhante Punaji's translation? Upa is inwards, Adana is taking. Bhante Punaji calls it personalizing.
Personalizing, yeah, there is a truth to that. It's not wrong, yeah, because what does it mean to grasp something? What it means to grasp something is to make it yours, yeah. You try to hold on to it. You try to make it my property. Yeah, that's what grasping means. This view is my view. These five khandhas, this body is my five khandhas. So personalizing it means to take it to be mine. So it is that's an interesting translation. Yeah, it's a different angle on the same problem, and it shows you an alternative way of thinking about it. So I think that's an interesting way of looking at it. Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Ajahn. I think that's all for now.